Which team, since I picked the Lakers to start off, which team are you most fascinated by based off what's happened in free agency so far?
I think it's probably the Bulls. I mean, you alluded to it. And I think I kind of had a macro thought about them, and this might just be like trying to be contrarian, but I feel like we judge. So let's take the DeRozan signing or sign and trade. So he's going to make 85 million over 3 years. Everybody that covers the league fairly closely and cares about the numbers knows that like his teams are always worse when he plays. He's a bad defender. He doesn't space the floor. He's an empty calories scorer, even though he gets to the line. Like he's just not he's not well thought of among people that care about the numbers and or more than just like, oh look, that was a sweet like mid post move, which he can do. Um, and they also got Lonzo Ball and they signed Alex Caruso. So the Bulls are better, or they're more talented. Their offense should be better. But essentially, like these are all moves that you make, with possibly the exception of Ball, that just broadcast like we are not trying to win at a high level. Like you cannot make these moves and say this is a team we're trying to build a championship. And you could take that back to the Vucevic trade last year. Like that's not a move you make, trading 2 firsts and some salary filler for a guy that just his team's top out at the 8th seed. That's what happens. But I think like was there a realistic move that the Bulls could have made that would have put them in championship contention? No, like of course not. So, and I think that would be true for as long as Giannis is in Milwaukee, and as long as the Nets are good, and as long as the Lakers are good. Like there was no path to the Bulls being a title contender for like the next 5 years conservatively. So they're going to be better and more entertaining and sell more tickets and win more games. And so I'm just trying to like devil's advocate my way into the Bulls offseason not being horrible, while acknowledging that like dollar for dollar, DeRozan is probably one of the worst signings. I think the Cavs might have made the worst one of free agency. So I don't know. It's just like my thought on free agency.
I'll get to that Cavs one in a second, but the Bulls, I think you're being a little hard because I like the Caruso and Lonzo signings on their face. Maybe the Caruso deal in that final year looks a little bit iffy, but I think Lonzo Ball is a nice fit next to Levine and Vooch, and he's young enough to where if you're bad, it's not that big of a concern. I think this might speak to the overarching problem of free agency this year is that the market of available, gettable talent did not meet the demand, and teams did not adjust their timelines accordingly. The Bulls clearly wanted to win now, and they still operated like that. The DeRozan move is where they kind of lost me. I could see a path to them being good next year, but I don't know what that means. And now you owe that 2023 pick to the Magic. I believe it's top 10 protected. And then now it's the 2025 pick. I think it's top 10 protected to the Spurs and then protected top 8 2 years after that, in addition to the Lakers 2022 second rounder and your own 2025 second rounder. So you've mortgaged like parts of your future. And there are 2 ways to look at this. They're finally acting like a big market team where it's, hey, we're going to operate with some level of competency on the court. And maybe that will attract other players to come. And they still have Kobe White. They still have Patrick Williams. These deals that they signed are not, with the exception of DeRozan, are not immovable. Maybe if someone wants to come, they can flip for another star. They are taking a risk, though. Zach LaVine seems happy with the moves. He tweeted the purple devil eyes emoji, whatever you call that. So he seems happy. But now you've punted on a renegotiation and extension with him.
Right.
You could still offer him the most money in free agency, but now he's reaching free agency. And if this year goes belly up, it could really come back to bite you. So I applaud the aggression, but the market just didn't justify it. And I think what they did within the confines of that market was actually really good, verging on no-brainer activity until you got to that DeRozan deal. Because, you already made the Vooch trade. I wouldn't have made it. I said that. Bulls fans killed me. I know that Zach LaVine missed time, the health and safety protocols after that. But to give up those 2 first-round picks, I still believe in Wendell Carter Jr., but, you're not going to cry over him. You're not going to cry over Otto Porter. I get it. But to give up those 2 first-round picks and then miss the play-in tournament, that's disastrous to me. But I still don't hate their offseason. The DeRozan move is what makes me go, okay, wow. And I don't know how this fits then. I like DeRozan with LaVine offensively. I like DeRozan with Lonzo offensively. Put all those 3 guys together, throw Vooch in there. You're asking a lot all of a sudden of Lonzo and Patrick Williams on defense. And what is their big man rotation right now after trading Thaddeus Young? They haven't re-signed Larry Markkinen. I would assume and here's so I want to throw this question to you. I just assumed Lauri Markkanen would be involved in that sign and trade if it happened. The fact that he wasn't, do you think that shows San Antonio preferred the draft equity or that Chicago wants to keep Markkanen? They kind of have to keep him now, but I'm wondering if that was their prerogative going into those talks.
That's a good question. I feel like all along I sort of thought that Markkanen would end up with the Spurs. I can remember writing stuff predicting that they would make him an offer sheet. But yeah, no, I think it's probably the Spurs just preferred the package they got and didn't want anything to do with Markkanen. I want to go back to a couple DeRozan things though, because like I'm with you. Like I'm of two minds about it. The DeRozan thing. So two problems. I actually don't think he's a good fit with LaVine because you're going to have two wings that can't guard anybody. And I think if you can say LaVine can play off the ball because he's a great shooter, but I don't think you should take the ball out of his hands if you have a choice between him and DeRozan doesn't space the floor at all. So I don't like that fit. I think they overlap in ways that might make it harder for LaVine to succeed. The other thing is just the money. Like, I'm sure this take is out there and it's justifiable. Who were the Bulls beating with this 3 for 85?
I'm assuming it was just the Spurs where they were like, well, we're just going to keep DeRozan. And it was sort of like that type of thing where maybe DeRozan and them worked in tandem to just drive up the Bulls' offer, both monetarily and looking at the assets. But I'm with you. I don't know what I'm looking at and I'm going to mention this team, like who is giving Derrick Rose 3 years and $43 million?
I don't know. Is Tom Thibodeau going to get hired by another team during free agency? Because the Matt team might do it, but other than that, I can't think of one. No, yeah, I don't know. The Bulls are. Would the Bulls have been on your short list of the like interesting or intriguing teams in free agency? Because
I mean, they're fascinating as hell now if they weren't before. And so I think DeRozan and LaVine can work offensively just fine. DeRozan's Chicago's best passer now, and so maybe that's why he's turned into a really good point guard, like point wing. I'm assuming he's going to play a lot of power forward. He started doing that in San Antonio. So maybe that opens up different, machinations to hide him. I don't know. I would expect them to be pretty bad defensively, but they could have a top 10 offense. I don't hate their offseason, but I went from embracing it to being iffy on it after the DeRozan deal, which is pretty much where I sit. And we kind of have to see where the pieces lie, but like their big man rotation is now shallower. I think you can argue that Thaddeus Young was a much better fit for this team based off their needs than bringing back Lauri Markkanen. That being said, the defense last year with Vooch and Young on the floor was they gave up more than 115 points per 100 possessions. So it wasn't great. And so maybe you're looking at that. But even still, Young as a 5 option in certain lineups when Vooch is sitting, it just felt like it made more sense. You have to see how it all comes together, but they're taking a lot. They're taking on a lot of risk here, and I'm just not sure the payoff is going to be worth it. Where I still think with Caruso and LaVine and with that first pick in the Vooch trade already conveying, it was sort of like, okay, we're in between mode, but now you firmly committed to win now without, I would argue, a ceiling that even includes a top 4 finish in the East. I would be, look, if you're going to finish ahead of Miami, Brooklyn, I think Philly's still there. There's weird shit afoot at the moment. Danny Green still hasn't resigned and what's going on with Ben Simmons. But Milwaukee, Philly, Miami, Brooklyn, like those are 3 teams I'd probably say are still better than Chicago. Then you get in, but you get into a lot of ifs, but there are enough ifs where it's like not all those are going to break right for the Bulls. Are they better than the Knicks? You could probably say majority, maybe. The Hawks, you mentioned them. What about the Celtics? Haven't done much, but it's okay to like the Celtics from my perspective better than the Bulls right now. The Pacers just have a bunch of really good above replacement level players, many of whom don't fit together, but maybe they tie it all together in some way. So the DeRozan move was curious. The overarching play of going all in, I think, was more justifiable before that move, just because they've acted like such a penny pinching, non-glamour market franchise or non-flagship market franchise, whatever you want to call it, for too long. And so I like the idea here, but it's once again with the Vooch trade, I feel like they went a step too far in the assets they gave up. And now with this, I'm like, you went one investment too far this offseason. And like, does the DeRozan deal look, what if it was like, and it couldn't have been because it was a sign and trade, so it has to be at least 3 years in length. But if it was a 2+1 and it's a team option on the 3rd year, then okay. But I think it's fully guaranteed from what I'm seeing. So they're fascinating as hell, but I went from, again, almost loving their offseason to kind of what the fuck mode.